Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson and Stephen Jonas with Veterans in Politics. Today we have Robert Tellis, who is the Clark County Public Administrator. Before we go to Mr. Tellis, Steve, you got something?
Actually, I have a lot of things, but I'm just going to leave it today because there's so many things happening right now that just make me angry. And it's not, the situation itself is frustrating, but it's how people are reacting to it that drives me crazy.
Gotcha.
And the lack of principle that people have where they'll apply outrage over a certain group and not another group, but yet they're guilty of the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Just
Hypocrites.
hypocrite.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy. And that's all I see right now.
Well, I don't have anything. Let's go right to the Public Administrator, Robert Tellis. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing real good. Tell us about yourself.
So I was elected to the office of the Clark County Public Administrator and started my role a couple of years ago. A lot of folks don't know that the Clark County Public Administrator is a safeguarding organization. We also administer estates. So when folks pass away in Clark County and family can't be immediately found, the coroner refers the case to us so that we can get to the home, protect the assets that are in the home, and do our search for the family.
I want to know about you a little bit.
Okay.
About you, then we could
Sure.
about
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about you.
Okay.
Give us a bio.
Absolutely.
Where you grew up, where you from.
So, originally from, I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Ah.
My dad was in the Air Force. He served one term. And,
So you're a brat. Then, huh?
you know, and I love that he was in the service. He didn't make it a career.
Gotcha.
You know, so I was born in Biloxi. My little brother was born in Fort Worth. And we came back home to El Paso, Texas, where my mom and dad had grown up. And so I grew up there. Then I spent a few years in the Denver metro area. Okay. Then I came out here to Las Vegas.
How long have you been in Vegas?
A little over 20 years.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so I really, it's home now. Right. You know, I think a lot of people come here thinking, well, you know what, I'll be here for now. Yeah. But this city just grows on you, and you just can't think of anywhere else to live after Absolutely. You've been here for a while, right?
That's true.
Yeah, my grandpa used to talk about in the 50s because he was in the area because he was in the Army during all the testing out at the test site. He said people would come to Vegas for like 2 weeks and then never leave. They just come here for vacation, but for whatever reason, just never leave.
So, Mr. Tellis, any family, wife, kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got my beautiful wife at home right now. Well, she's actually...
She should be home.
No, she's actually practicing hula. She's actually out at the moment. She's part of a hula group, and they're going to have a performance pretty soon.
Okay.
So I'm pretty excited to go watch that show here in a couple of months. But I have my wife and my 3 wonderful children. Right. Wonderful most of the time.
Right.
You know, sometimes...
How old are they?
So I've got a 15-year-old stepson. Mm-hmm. And I've got a 13-year-old daughter from my previous marriage. Mm-hmm. And then I have the 10-year-old that my wife and I have together.
You guys just mixed it up, huh?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But everyone gets along really well. Even us with the exes, it's kind of funny. My littlest one, the 10-year-old, will go spend the night at my ex-wife's house or my wife's ex-husband's house. It's we all just get along. It's pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
See, role model for family court.
No kidding. That's always good.
That's how you're supposed to do it, right?
I know. I dated a single mom once, and every time she interacted with her ex with the kids around, it looked like those two were just fine.
Right.
And I remember one time we were hanging out afterwards, and like 20 minutes of her just going off about the guy. I was like, "What? I thought you." This isn't your case. I'm just saying, like, this isn't your case, I'm sure, at all. But like that, I still always remember that. It was like 20 minutes of her. I was like, I thought you. It's like, well, for my kids, yeah. Personally, I hate them. I was like, okay. I just sat there with my chin on the floor. I'm like, what?
Your chin on the floor, huh?
Jaw on the floor.
So, profession. What's your profession?
Well, so I've had a few professions over my life. I've been in property management.
Okay.
You know, working anywhere from in the leasing office to actually being a maintenance guy. I know we were talking about kind of off the topic, but talking about toilets earlier. I've changed probably, you know, 100 toilets. It sounds like I might have to help here in a minute.
You just volunteered. Wow. We can go grab lunch. You got an hour, get it done.
I'll get it done in an hour. Less.
Oh, boy.
And then I've also worked in air conditioning as well. I was EPA certified. I was one of the air conditioning techs that drove a truck around town, repairing ACs in homes and in businesses. Then I went to work for the College of Southern Nevada, supervising a team out there at their campuses.
Okay.
And while I was doing that, I went and got my law degree. I did that at night while I was working during the day.
How long have you been practicing law now?
Well, I guess I want to say it's been about almost 7 years now. And I don't right
Still
now.
active, right?
I keep my bar card, but
Okay.
I don't take on clients or anything. The Office of the Clark County Public Administrator keeps me more than busy.
Busy, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't do no side jobs?
No.
No ghost writing?
If a friend asked me to come take a look at their AC, I do that as a favor. But, you know, I've got, or even, well, I guess when it comes to lawyering, that's a different story because once you get into something,
Right.
it is too hard to walk away. So
Yeah.
I just unfortunately can't even really do anything on the side for friends when it comes to the lawyering aspect.
I hear you. Once I start a project, I gotta see it through. That's why I don't like starting projects because I get haunted. So just like this toilet, now I gotta like see it through now. But what type of law do you practice?
So my primary focus was probate, which really dovetails well with the Clark County Public Administrator's Office.
Were you the first attorney in the public administrator office to that was an attorney before you got there?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good experience and quality and job profession to have, being a public administrator.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of the stuff are legalese, and you really need to know the law to become a public. Well, the way it's set up, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a public administrator, but being a lawyer in the public administrator's office says a lot about how you could accomplish and make that office successful. Correct?
I was able to hit the ground running and
Right.
work really hard, and the results are there. We've definitely made some great strides when it comes to the way that the office is operating.
Right. So, what's the purpose of the public administrator's office?
So really, because we are such a large county.
And you guys used to be public administrator and guardianship, and then they separated the two. Now the guardianship is appointed, the public administrator is elected.
That's absolutely right.
Explain your umbrella.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, we have a sister organization, the Clark County Public Guardian. They handle guardianships over folks who, again, cannot handle their own affairs, and family cannot step in to get the guardianship.
You don't want to mix up the guardianship with the public administrators,
right.
Because we saw that documentary, The Guardian. It talks about Vegas. Stay clear away from that one.
And you know, I know that our current public guardian's doing her very best. You know, they've changed all the laws significantly after the tragic happenings that occurred not too long ago.
Right.
And so, I know for myself, when I was in private practice, I'd run into a particular situation where someone had alleged that a family member had come to town just on vacation, got hurt while here on vacation. And one of the private guardians who was operating at the time actually rushed in and got an emergency guardianship over this person, and made this person, at the time it was called wards, made this person a ward, and refused to allow the family to take this person back home.
Wow.
This person was not a resident of Las Vegas at the time. So that was really incredible to me, like how horrible things were at the time.
After I watched that documentary, The Guardian, nothing will surprise me. Nothing will surprise me. But let's just concentrate on your office, because I don't want the viewers and listeners to think that you had anything to do with that.
No. And in fact, when I was in private practice, I took a pro bono case where we were able to get a judgment against one of the private guardians. But that's, again, like you said, that's something else altogether.
Yeah, because I got a question. Well, just real quick though, so the guardianship thing, is that kind of like how Britney Spears' father could control everything about her life? Is that pretty much sums that up?
So it
Finances,
seems, and again,
decisions.
I'm not up on California law, but it seems that she was likely deemed by the courts to not be able to handle her own affairs.
Right.
And so he was appointed to manage her affairs for her.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know what the purpose of the public administrator's office is until, there's an election cycle, which there's one next year. And you're running for re-election, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. So I'm just going to throw a scenario and you tell me how your office fit in. So Metro gets called to an apartment and for a welfare check. And upon entering the apartment, they found a deceased victim. There was no sign of foul play. It looked like the victim died of natural causes. Take us from there.
Sure. So the officers will then contact the coroner's office. The coroner will head to the home, and inspect the body. And again, regarding their process, I couldn't get into detail about how they operate once they get to home. Right. But at a certain point, they are looking for family members, right? They want to, if they can, call family, next of kin really, and say, unfortunately, your loved one is deceased. We need you to come to the home as soon as possible.
And a lot of people don't like talking about dying. Everybody's talking about living, but in this world we're living today, dying is more frequent than we even realize. And people need to start planning for that. But please continue.
Yeah, no, and so if they don't happen to find family, or if family cannot respond immediately, if family's living out of state, or whatever the case may be, then the coroner will refer the matter to us. Okay. We'll then send out an investigator team, and it typically doesn't happen same day, unfortunately.
And what do they look for your team?
So the first thing we do, because the coroner, obviously they're very busy, very shorthanded, and really it's not their charge to handle the property side. It's really our duty. We will do a more in-depth search for family while we're there in the home. Right, finding any family leads, contact those family members and notify them, or typically pass it to the coroner's office, who can then notify the folks, and then we can go ahead and go about the rest of the process, which I'll discuss here in a minute. Okay. But the other thing that we'll do is we'll secure any valuables that may be in the home.
So does your team go through some type of background check and
right, absolutely,
and all that?
Background check. We want to make sure that these folks are trustworthy, and of course also too, for the sake of transparency and faith in our office, we send 2 investigators to every call. Right,
and one watches the other.
They're watching each other, and we can make sure that, again, people can have faith in the process, because we're not sending a single investigator out to any home.
Duffel bag.
Right, and
only one watch.
Yeah, so we want to avoid any of that. Right. And of course, in my team, I think they're all great folks. A lot of our team are former law enforcement or working, for the fire department. Just, we have a lot of really great folks working on the team.
So you guys go in there and you take, after the body is removed, right? Mm-hmm. You inventory the property, take pictures. What do you do?
Right, exactly right. We go through, we take pictures of everything on site. We'll recover cash, jewelry, firearms, any other small collectibles.
Funny you mention that. I like to know, what was the most cash you guys ever recovered, and firearms and jewelry. I like just curiosity.
Right. I mean, a lot of our cases won't have too much, unfortunately, or I don't know if it's unfortunately or not. But we'll have a lot of folks who might live in a small apartment, just have a few things. and we'll recover whatever we need to. But sometimes there are folks who have significant assets. We've found about $70,000 hidden, in a little hiding spot, incredibly.
Wow.
We've also run into situations, and I think particularly lately, where folks might have 20, 30, 40, 50 guns.
Wow.
So it's...
Jewelry?
Jewelry, again, just depending on the home. I mean, we could certainly find significant jewelry as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you inventory the place, you take pictures. Where do you ship their belongings?
So we've got a vault and a warehouse on site, and we store everything there while we wait for family and verify who family is.
Okay. And let's say you don't know who the family is. Nobody shows up. What happens?
So that's worst case, but we do want to try our very best to get things in the hands of family.
Right.
But there are oftentimes situations where we just cannot find the family. The coroner has their investigative tools. We have our own investigative tools. When we can't find family, we need to make sure that we protect the assets. So we will go ahead and move forward with an administration.
What does that mean?
So the thing that a lot of people don't know, surprisingly, because, like you said, unfortunately, folks pass away all the time, is that when someone has something in their name, like bank accounts, vehicles, homes, the family just cannot automatically put those things in their name, right? They've got to go through a court process called probate, right? So that means typically hiring an attorney, having the attorney draft all the documents, getting things filed, and going through this process.
It becomes very expensive at this time.
It does. There are ways to avoid it. There are ways to avoid my office, and then
we're gonna get how to avoid you.
Absolutely. So in order to get to that point, again, they're going to have to hire an attorney typically to get those assets in their own name. So for us, when we have to administer an estate, as we call it, we, depending on the value of the estate, we may have to hire an attorney. We'll get the attorney set up. Then that attorney will get us our legal authority, because we need a court order allowing us to start liquidating assets. Right? We'll start liquidating the assets, and if we don't yet have family identified, then we'll go ahead and hire a professional heir search firm, right? A genealogist who can further investigate and help us find this family.
So you guys just don't stop; you just keep going. And how long does this process go for?
It really depends. Probates can take as little as 3 months, but oftentimes it can take years.
So, what's the max years you'll stop searching?
Well, frankly, as far as stopping the search, once our genealogist has said that they've run out of leads, then that's when we stop.
Okay.
Right, because that professional has so many tools at their disposal that if they can't find this person, then no one, his family. Right.
So when you exhausted that and you liquidated the property, you do that at auctions. Let's say if they have a house, you auction it off, or vehicles and jewelry and guns, you auction it off.
So we've got various processes depending on what the asset is. Right. If it's a real property, if it's a home, we will hire a real estate agent. So our real estate agents, the thing that we are concerned about is making sure that, kind of back it a little bit, when we're looking at homes, we want to make sure that we're getting the highest value possible for the estate. Right. Oftentimes when we come into these homes and we have to administer, we may find that the homes are run down, carpet needs to be changed, kitchen cabinets should be replaced, paint should be done.
So you got to do some remodeling.
Right, because that could mean the difference between getting, for example, $100,000 for the home versus getting $150,000, $175,000 if we do those renovations, right? So if we were to sell it unrenovated, we sell it at this point, then all that equity that we could have received and put into the estate would now go into the pocket of the buyer instead.
Right.
Right. So
So do you seize bank accounts as well if you found that, or vaults or anything
sure. So
of value like that?
if we, once we get our letters of administration, we send instructions to the banks to go ahead and close out the accounts.
Okay.
Right. It's a different legal process than, say, doing a seizure.
So you go on their computer and do some type of analysis of their computer to find out, or do you wait for the mail to come in and to see? How do you do it?
So our investigators will go through the home and look for financial documents when they're, of course, safeguarding the other items as well. Right. They'll bring those documents in, because if we find family, we'll be able to transfer those documents to the family so that they have more information when they do the administration. If not, if we're forced to do it, then we've got those additional tools. Okay. But at some point, if we're going to administer, we will do a change of address, and we will watch for statements for any assets to roll in so that we can go ahead and administer those assets.
So once you have exhausted the efforts of finding next of kin and you have liquidated all of the assets, where does the monies go?
So we will go ahead and petition the court, really just to note that we've done these things. We've exhausted these efforts to try to find these folks. We have not. Therefore, we're going to ask the court to allow us to give the funds to the Nevada State Treasurer.
Okay. Treasurer gets it.
Right. And those funds would ultimately go toward educational purposes.
Okay. So let's go with the other scenario now. Now, family members say, hey, that's Uncle Bob. How does one person verify that they're next of kin? And what are the process for that next of kin have to go through to obtain the assets?
So typically we will go ahead and provide the information to the coroner.
Okay.
And the coroner will do the verification of kin.
Okay.
And oftentimes, if there's question about whether or not this person is kin.
How close of a kin you got to be?
So that really depends on
Could you be like the grand cousin, 5 generations down? Well, I don't think they live that long, right? Maybe 3 generations down or something. I mean, how far of a kin?
That could be the person, but again, we have to go through a certain hierarchy,
okay,
right? Because we do need to find legal next of kin, right? If someone passes away and they have children, then and they're not married,
right,
then the children would receive the property.
Right.
If someone passed away with no children and no spouse, but parents are alive, then the parents would inherit.
How long does that process take, and what does one have to prove? How do they have to prove that they are related to the deceased?
So the coroner, again, will verify that. And if for some reason we are concerned that, they don't have the same last name, we'll often ask for birth certificates.
And there's a lot of that going around because they're married couples that they don't take each other's last name anymore.
Mm-hmm. And it's true, but we often do find that when there's a spouse, there's evidence, and we will identify that spouse, and we'll use other tools at our disposal to make sure that again, that is the rightful person who's supposed to receive.
When someone has multiple kids in their estate or whatever is getting, does it go to the oldest and then they decide, or is it even if they have like 3 kids? Is it a third? Each get a third, or a fourth or fifth?
So you're
broken down, or
so if we had someone who passed away with 3 children, each of the children would get a third.
Okay.
Right? Again, provided there's no spouse.
Okay.
Right? There are other laws regarding spouses. Typically, if it's all community property, the spouse gets it. But if somebody, like say, had rental properties or other type of assets before they got married, that may be subject to a different type of distribution scheme. Right. It's really kind of fascinating, probate, and how all that works. But when it comes to like us and releasing, we want to look for the legal next of kin. So if someone passes away and it turns out that they had no children, their parents are deceased, then we'll see if they have siblings. And if the siblings have passed away, did the siblings have any children? And if not, then we go on up to, grandparents, aunts and uncles. There's, again, a very specific hierarchy. And sometimes we run into cases where everyone's deceased and only cousins can be found. But again, so long as all those other folks who would be coming in line first have passed away,
right,
then those cousins would receive.
Okay. So now that you walked us through, if a person have no next of kin, and you walked us through when a person has a next of kin. Now, how does one avoid your office completely?
And so that's a good point, because there's one little caveat about that whole legal next of kin thing. If someone has an estate plan, then our duty is to transfer the assets to the executor or trustee, and not legal next of kin. So I've got to qualify that.
You're talking about like a living trust.
Right. So if our investigators get into a home and we find that there was a will or a trust, then we need to turn those assets over to the person named as executor or trustee, and not family.
That makes life a whole lot easier, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now, what happens if this person has a living will or a trust, but you just can't find it? How does a person take their living trust and put it somewhere that if something happens, that somebody can find it? How does that work?
Well, and so that's
to go to the recorder's office and record it. How does that work?
Unfortunately, that's one of the downfalls of having a trust. Well, I mean, it's also a benefit too, though, right? Because when you've got a trust, oftentimes you don't want others to know your personal business, right? You don't want it to be on a court docket somewhere showing everything you have.
If you're the beneficiary, you're probably, oh man, Uncle Bob has to go, you know, you know what I mean? I just want to know how could you safeguard your trust in a way that the authorities could find it, but you know, it's not easily available for the general public.
Right. So there are a couple of different things that someone can do, right? You could put it in a safe deposit box. You could make sure that contact information for your attorney can be found, because oftentimes the attorney who drafted the trust, if you used an attorney, they'll have copies on site.
Everybody has their phone nowadays.
Right. And so the other thing I would often recommend is that you email your successor trustee a copy.
And what happened if the attorney deceases before you do?
Unfortunately, that could be a situation, especially if they have no succession plan for their law firm. That could be a bit tricky. But the other thing I would say is to email your trustee, and if you're comfortable with it, email the beneficiaries as well. Email them copies of the documents.
And what happened if you talking about the executor to the trust?
So there are two different types of estate planning documents.
Because you got your trustee and your beneficiaries, your beneficiaries, and then out of the beneficiaries, you might have an executor on the trust, somebody that's going to read the trust, right? But what happens if the executor is one of the beneficiaries? There are a couple.
I know
you're a lawyer, so I know you can handle it.
No, there are different types of. There are two different types of main estate planning documents, right? The first is the last will and testament. Okay. Right? That's the document.
Sounds like the 10 Commandments.
So that's a document that you draft telling everybody what you want done with your stuff. Right? What a lot of people don't know is that when you get a last will and testament, you are still, if the assets meet a certain threshold in value, you are still going to court on that last will and testament. Last wills and testament do not avoid probate court. It just tells your executor and the court how you want things distributed. And
why would it still go to probate if you have everything written down?
So again, it's just a direction to everyone as to how to distribute everything. You may want to have distributions to certain people who would be your legal next of kin and not others, right? So again, it's just I guess the way that the system works, wills only tell people how to handle the court process. Okay. It won't avoid the court process. Okay. Whereas living trusts will avoid the court process, typically, as long as there are no court battles over trusts. But if you have a trust, your family can avoid the entire probate process, which is obviously of benefit because probate can, as we discussed, take years. Right. And you've got to hire attorneys, and attorneys' fees again.
It's pricey.
Can be.
But don't the last will and testament and the living trust accomplishes the same thing, because the living trust is telling the living how you want your property to be distributed, right?
So yes, but at the same time, it also has the added benefit of avoiding probate as well, because your successor trustee, when the person named in the trust as a successor trustee, can step in, recording a couple of documents, and can begin to administer the trust without having to open a probate action or anything. And then there's another benefit to trusts. So if, for example, let's say that you've got some younger children, and of course you want to give them everything, but you're concerned that, if you pass away, maybe you've got a life insurance policy, maybe you've got other assets you've accumulated, and you run into a situation, or you could, if you're thinking ahead, you could run into a situation where you might be dropping, $500,000 on one of your children, or of course, if it was 3 children, all 3 children. And if you are concerned about whether or not this person can spend it wisely, whether or not they might go out and buy a nice sports car and throw big parties and just blow through the cash.
And not using it for college.
Or not using it for college, or using it for other wise investments, like maybe putting it down on a home. In a trust, you can actually specify periodic distributions instead, right? You can tell your trustee, who might be a trusted sibling or some other person that you know is of good moral character. You can tell this person, hey, when it comes to my children, I want you to distribute 1/3 of the trust when they turn 25, 1 when they turn 30, and then give them the rest at 35.
But you have to trust the administrator is going to do that.
Right, but that's going to be spelled out in that document. If you have a will, those distributions are outright. You cannot stagger distributions in a will like you can with a trust.
A good friend of mine had that happen, where his grandma unfortunately passed away, and then she had quite a bit of assets. And he's doing the right thing. He is of good moral character. But yeah, it kind of made it weird that he's worried about some stuff going on, doesn't want to dump too much money on one person or certain family members or whatever. So a way to avoid that is, because I believe she only had a last will and testament, would have a trust set up and
having a trust instead.
Stipulations.
Exactly right.
So what happens if the deceased, let's say, has $1 million life insurance policy, and in that policy it says the beneficiaries and the percentage, and then that policy is also mentioned in the trust. So where would the trust would dictate how the policy is to be paid out, or does the policy stand on its own?
You're right when you mention the second option, because that beneficiary designation, it will supersede what you've written in the trust. The only way to make sure that the trust controls is to make the beneficiary the trust instead of making it those individuals.
I have another question. So if you make the beneficiary the trust, but in the policy you also say this goes to this person, this goes to that person, and the trust doesn't say anything like that, would the trust divide it equally, or would the trust follow what the policy says as far as percentage per person?
Yeah, so if you're completing your beneficiary designation form for the life insurance policy, and you want the trust to control your distributions, you would have the trust listed as the sole beneficiary on the life insurance policy. So you wouldn't have any of the designations, percentages to whomever in the insurance policy. All of the terms of distribution are going to be in that trust.
So let's say you do this. Let's say you have your policy, and you broke up each beneficiary as far as percentage, and one of those beneficiary is of minor age. Could the trust say, hey, at this age, that amount, at this age, that amount? or would the policy just give the lump sum to the minor?
The policy would still control in that situation. And oftentimes, depending on the value, and this is very interesting, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, whether it's not a feature or a flaw, but it's just something that must be done. When someone passes away and they've left a minor as a beneficiary, then even if parents are alive, the parents have to open a guardianship, oftentimes, to collect the proceeds of that policy and put it in a blocked account until the child turns 18.
Gotcha. But they won't. It won't dictate any type of living expenses for the child until the child gets to turn 18.
No, that would have to be that have to be upon petition to the court at that point. Right.
Gotcha.
So you'd actually
more
like
legalese. Huh?
Yeah. Even if there are parents, let's say grandma left an insurance policy and named one of the children, or left retirement accounts or stock accounts for the children, thinking that these kids were going to reach the age of majority before she passed, but she passes away, then the parents actually have to petition the court for a guardianship, despite the fact that they're already the parents, so that they can go ahead and collect those funds and park it in a blocked account. And then if they think that there are some extraordinary needs, and have to be extraordinary typically, again, everyone should always talk to an attorney before you do any of this. I'm not providing legal advice.
You are an attorney.
I am an attorney, but obviously, talking to folks out there, you can't hit every single situation when it's a one-way conversation. So I would say that, again, going back to that, I mean, it's kind of interesting that a parent would have to open a guardianship for their child just to collect those assets, and then at 18, those assets can be paid. So
what happens if the parents put together some type of guardianship before, just in case they ever pass, and say that, okay, the minor child is to go to this member of the family, right, and had it all notarized, and both parents pass away, does that document stand on its own?
So you could certainly have,
that document would be the guardianship of where the parent want that minor child to go?
So in your typical estate plan, right, whether you're doing a will-based estate plan or a trust-based one, I totally recommend a trust-based one, especially if you have real property.
Right.
But when you do that trust, you're typically, if you're going to an attorney, you're not just going to have your trust. You're also going to have powers of attorney for healthcare decisions, and powers of attorney for finance as well. And so
should that be in the trust?
That'll be a separate document along with your plan, right? Your estate plan. So again, if you're going to any attorney to get those documents done, if they're an estate planning attorney, they will provide you that as part of your estate plan, right? And what those documents do is they allow other people to act on your behalf without having to go to court. If you happen to become, incompetent, right? If something happens to you,
mentally insane,
right?
Car accident, anything.
Right. And of course, again, there are different ways to get there to exercise that power of attorney. Absolutely. But in that same power of attorney, or actually I say in the will, if you got a last will and testament, which again, if you're going to an attorney for a trust, they'll also still provide a will. And, I don't know, we want to get into why we still have a will when we have a trust, but in the will, that's where you can actually designate a guardian, someone that you'd like to nominate to take care of your children if you pass. And then when you do pass, that person can take that nomination, file it with court, and petition to get that guardianship.
Should that be in the trust?
That would be
who you want your minor child to go to?
That would be in the estate plan. Yep.
So that's the trust.
So
and what's the difference between a trust and a will?
It's again just avoiding probate is the number one thing with a trust.
Trust avoids probate. A will, you're just
telling everyone how to distribute it.
Good to know. So explain this. what's the difference between an irrevocable trust and the revocable trust?
So there are.
He came on. This is good conversation. This is good stuff.
Education today.
On veterans and politics, we educate you.
So and again, there are, I wouldn't say numerous reasons that someone would want an irrevocable trust, but there are at least a handful of reasons. An irrevocable trust is one that creditors cannot invade.
Creditors.
Right. So I mean,
and
again,
explain
sure.
that. Explain that caveat.
Right. Well, so let's say, for example, you run a successful medical practice or what have you. You've got significant exposure. You've also got significant assets. Then you might want to create an irrevocable trust, right? But the interesting thing about that is, when you create an irrevocable trust and you put those assets into it,
you can't take it out.
You can't take it out. You're giving someone else the authority to manage it for you. You can still enjoy, the assets of the trust. Mm-hmm. You just don't have control over those assets anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, if a certain number of years pass under the law, mm-hmm. right, with those assets being in the trust, let's say you get 5 years out, those assets cannot be touched by creditors, or if somebody sues you and gets judgment against you, they cannot touch those assets as long as.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But again, frankly, I think most folks, it sounds great, but I think most folks don't really want to
have money they can't touch, right?
Right. Well, and also, the idea of someone else altogether controlling your assets, and of course, getting a fee to control those assets while you're alive. Again, it's got to be pretty significant, I think, personally. It's got to be such that the trust assets generate enough revenue themselves that it pays that trustee. Because otherwise, for you to pay them out of your pocket to administer your trust.
And what happens if the trustee is the person that's being covered by the trust?
So
let's say I have a trust, right, and I have my assets in this trust, but I'm also the trustee.
So you still retain control. Okay. So you can't unfortunately have an irrevocable trust, right? You've got to have a third party.
Gotcha.
Right, administering that trust. So that's really one of the downsides. I mean, again, if you are someone who has significant assets, and again, not legal advice, always talk to an attorney.
How much is significant to you?
And again, it really depends. I couldn't mark it at a certain dollar amount.
Does it depend on the individual?
Right. You should always get a consultation with an attorney when you're thinking about trust-based estate planning, whether it be you just want to avoid probate, or you think that you need creditor protection, right?
So if you have, let's say you have a vehicle and you put this in an irrevocable trust, but you're still making payments on that vehicle and you stop making payments on the vehicle, could the creditor come and take the vehicle?
You cannot put a vehicle into a trust unless it's paid off and you've got the title in hand.
Good to know.
So you can't use that as a way not to make car payments, I guess.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And you also cannot create an irrevocable trust when you know you're going to be sued.
Okay.
Oh. Right. And so
that would be the time to be like, so I want to get this money over here.
So I have another question surrounding that whole scenario, but I just lost a train of thought. Oh yeah, I know what it is. So what happens if you put a vehicle into the irrevocable trust, but that vehicle got into an accident, it's a total loss? What happens?
Well, again, it would really depend. Obviously, there's insurance that you'd have on the vehicle.
But you can take it out, is my question. You could take it out of the irrevocable trust since it's a total loss?
Right. The trustee would have control to resolve that situation.
Okay.
right? And again, I think for most folks, I think they want to really talk to an attorney about whether or not they need an irrevocable trust, because often the expenses of an irrevocable trust outweigh the benefits for most folks, right? I almost think that you've got to have really, again, a significant amount of liability, being, a brain surgeon or someone, again, that just has such exposure that the insurances, maybe won't even cover the exposure. That's when you might consider an irrevocable trust.
So you can't even put a house in an irrevocable trust unless you have the deed to the house, right? That's what you're saying.
And again, that would all really depend. Because obviously there's always equity, or not always, but oftentimes there's equity in homes. And you can put homes in revocable living trusts. There's just so much involved with real estate and placing them in trusts that I think we'd have a couple hour show on that alone.
Yeah, in fact, this is a very interesting topic, and a lot of people have no clue about this at all, because they're living day to day and they're not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and then when I know growing up, until actually probably about 5 years ago, anytime I heard trust, I was just like, yeah, it's rich people stuff. Like, that's what I always imagined, was just some old rich white dudes sitting there going, oh, this is my Blake family trust, and blah, blah. That's pretty much how most people think it is, but how good it is at a young age to understand it and to be able to get the stuff going at a young age would be very helpful.
So Public Administrator Tellis, let's go back to your office now. You've been there going on, 4 years now?
No, I've got about almost 2.5 years under my belt now.
Oh, is this a 4-year office?
It's a 4-year term. Yep.
So
next year I'm going to be up for re-election.
Okay.
I'll be running for re-election. So by the time, and next year
by the time you're swearing in, it'll be the 4th year.
Exactly.
So this is 2, next year is 3,
and
then come around to the 4.
Exactly right.
Okay. How many people you have working in the PA's office?
We have about 22 right this moment, but we've got 10 who work in the office.
Okay.
And then we have our 12 part-time investigators.
Gotcha.
Right, so they, again, work on a part-time basis. Unfortunately, the way that the economy is right now, we'd love to have full-time investigators, but it is what it is. And we do make do with the part-time investigators. We've got a nice running operation. Unfortunately, the number of referrals has skyrocketed, so that's been a little bit of a struggle. But we're doing it.
So what's the benefits of being a public administrator besides the salary? Do you have your own car? Do you have a gas card?
They did approve a vehicle for the public administrator's office, but we use that vehicle along with another vehicle we purchased after.
What are the county vehicles?
For our investigators instead.
Okay.
Right. I don't drive that vehicle. I'd rather that we use it for our mission as opposed to me just putting around in it.
Since you've been there the past couple of years, what changes have you made to improve that office?
So there's a fair list of changes. Absolutely. I've changed the structure of the office. The office was run along, but I saw the opportunity to really increase efficiency and transparency.
Right.
And again, I do believe that is because of my background, right? I immediately upon arriving, I saw numerous changes that I could make, and so we've made those changes, and I've seen a result. So, for example, we are now collecting and protecting double the property that we did before.
Wow.
Right? We're in 2017 we'd secured 18 homes. In 2020, 40 homes. In 2017, we'd secured 25 cars. In 2020, 66 cars. Right? And even
Where do you store these cars?
So we do have a secure lot.
Where's it located?
I can't remember where it is exactly. I'll have to get back
You need
to
a car
that.
for the weekend, Steve? We just go to the public administrator's lot. He won't know it's missing.
Oh, we got a lot of security. We keep our head on these things.
Okay, please continue with your analysis.
Obviously we've done that. We also closed double the cases than before my time. We're closing on average about 400 before I arrived, and in the last 2 years, we closed no less than 800 cases.
Wow!
Right, each year.
Right.
So it was just amazing that we were able to do that.
Do you have to appear in court a lot?
So with the pandemic, not so much anymore.
Blue jeans.
Right. And even then,
blue jeans folks is the video of the courts that they use, like Zoom and Skype.
Yeah, it's an interesting name for the software, right?
You know why I think, and this is my thinking. I think because you could just put your jeans on and just hang out. You don't have to put that 2-piece suit on with the tie and a nice starched shirt. Just throw a T-shirt on and some blue jeans and some sneakers, and you're good. I think that's where it only makes sense to me.
I'm sure, but
it's a relaxed atmosphere, right?
It's funny to me that like formal courts, as formal as they are, use a software called Blue Jeans for their hearings. But I'm sure it's because of the functionality, not because they like the name necessarily.
No holes in your jeans, please.
Or at least wear jeans.
I guess for some of these folks, no one may ever know. I don't know. As long as they don't stand up.
Hey, I always wonder what judges wear on their robe, but it's none of my business. Right?
I don't know that I need to actually know.
Please continue. How much money have you secured?
So we don't really keep track, unfortunately, of how much.
Send it to me and Steve. We'll keep
our system, while I'm creating these audit points, pulling data like this, we aren't there yet with getting so granular that I can say, this is how much, and But it is one of those data points that I really want to get, so we can show even then how much we are protecting for families as well.
How about stocks and bonds and all that? And rare coins and all that stuff? You guys take that in? Boats.
We protect all that. Rarely we get boats.
How you know they have a boat over at Lake Mead or something? How do you?
You'll see documents in the home, right? I mean, you'll see other evidence. Because if you've got a boat, sometimes you're going to have things are related to boats in your garage.
Year's membership at when it was taking membership big time, the foundation room. What do you guys do with stuff like that, or membership at a golf course or some type of country club and all that? What do you do with that? Does that hold value?
So we'd have to look at the terms of the contract with that organization, right? If there was a means for collecting unearned dues, then we would consider that an asset, and we'd request that they distribute that to us.
Gotcha.
Right. So, it's we look for all the assets
and all the credit cards. You cut them up, or
right, we destroy credit cards, checkbooks. We will, and really when it comes to credit cards, we don't immediately destroy those, just because of certain processes, but we always want to make sure we protect those. We don't want them to fall in the hands of folks who are going to run around and start charging those cards up, because when someone passes away, no one else should be allowed to get into their credit cards or their bank accounts. Right. So our goal is to make sure that we notify all the banks as soon as possible, so they can stop any activity. Because sometimes there are even bill pays that are coming out that shouldn't be coming out.
Right.
Like for insurance or gym memberships, those types of things. We don't want those things to continue, because if
they want them to continue,
of course.
Yeah, I laughed because I was thinking a couple of free trials I forgot to cancel. I'm like,
oh yeah,
I got a couple.
But they will, well, if we allow that to happen, we would then have to go back to these institutions and demand that money back. And we've already got enough on our plates. We don't want to go chasing things like that down.
So it'd be locking their credit report, something you guys could also do as well?
We don't typically. That's, something that, now that you bring it up, maybe something that we'll look into, right? But we find that as soon as we notify the SSA, the Social Security Administration, and we notify the banks, that we're typically protected there, right? And we do our very best to make sure we protect the Social Security numbers of folks. In fact, when it comes to car titles, when we're getting ready to sell a vehicle, one of the prior practices was just providing our court documents and our death certificate to the buyer through the auctioneer. The problem with that is, that third party, that buyer, is getting the social security number of the person that passed away. Right? And when I came into the office, I heard about that, and I didn't like that at all. Right? I mean, I think we've got a duty to protect these estates. So we don't need these after death debts to be incurred by someone fraudulently. So what we do now is we change the title so that we don't have to provide that death certificate anymore. So that's just one of the ways that we protect decedents and families.
And what happens if they have a business or they own property in another state or they own property abroad? How do you account for all of that?
So if, for example, they own a business, we will ask the court for authority to wind down the business. If the business
is going to be mad at you.
Well, right. Well, and of course, if the business has some value to it, instead we will hire a company, a CPA, to provide a business valuation.
So you do like a forensic audit or
so that we
something like that?
Not typically. A lot of the records are going to be there, right? There's going to be access to the CPA.
Gotcha.
And we honestly don't run into a lot of those situations.
Okay.
Right. But if it was the case that we could sell that business, again, we would get that valuation, and then we'd contract someone to help try to sell the business. Right.
What about property in other states or abroad?
Sure. When it comes to that, we do have to hire counsel.
Because I used to own property in Jamaica.
We would have to hire counsel in whatever country, right, in the vicinity of that property, so they can assist us with the process. Because the process, it could be different. It's going to be different all over the world, right? If it's another state, we also will likely contact an attorney and have them assist us with selling. Because just because we have letters of administration here or court authority here to sell, it doesn't mean we're going to have it in other states. We actually have to petition the courts out there to get that authority to sell the property.
How about counties? Within Nevada, different counties.
We could certainly still sell those assets. We may contract with a realtor who is out in that area for that assistance. But whenever we sell real property, we have to petition the court to sell it. Right? The courts want to make sure, and we want that too. We want to make sure that everything is transparent, that we are held accountable, and that we are exceeding standards of transparency and accountability. Right. So I always want to make sure that all of my real property gets sold at a court hearing. Right. When we're selling real property, there will be a bidding process the day that the court hears the petition to sell the property. And oftentimes you'll have bidders these folks will review all the court pleadings. They'll review the sales going on for that day. And if they see that there's a particularly appealing property, they will go ahead and appear in the hearing and bid on that property, which is a benefit because it raises the amount of money that the estate's going to receive. So we like that.
This has been very educational. But I had another question that I wanted to talk about, and that also escaped my mind as well. Oh, I know what it is. So you talked about, since you've been in that office, how you have improved it. Mm-hmm. Are you done with the improvement?
Well, I'm not done. Absolutely not.
No.
But I would say
that you already put into place. Is that complete?
As far as
the ones that you already put in place, is that?
No, there's obviously it's just been 2 short years.
Okay. Now then, my other question would be what improvements you want to implement, and what improvements that you put in place since you came there you want to continue.
Sure. So right now we're still developing all of our standard operating procedures. Okay. Right. I've written dozens of pages of procedures to make sure that it's very clear what the direction is. Make sure that my people know what the expectations are. Okay. But I'm still in that process. There are still areas of my office where that's being written. So still got to continue with that, right? Because the important thing is, in order for me to hold people to account, they have to know exactly the way that it needs to be done, right? So still working on that, and that's coming along really well. When it comes to, I guess, ensuring accountability, I want to codify some of the things that we do in our office to make sure that future public administrators have to do those things as well, right? The notion that no one should ever go to a home as a single investigator while we still have recoverable assets in the home, right? If our investigator team has gone through the home and we've collected all the assets, we also still do what are known as welfare checks, where we just cruise by to make sure that we don't have squatters in the home or that no one's broken into the home, which if you've been around Las Vegas a while, you know that unfortunately that squatters can be a huge problem for folks.
Yeah, squatters and appliances. I lived in actually it was in a good neighborhood too, when it was still, you'd just see a fridge or a washing machine just being pushed down the street. Or the parking lot, and it's just
Is that unusual?
There they would be with the grown guys with their BMX bikes hauling stuff.
And you know something, I really have to mention this because my 12-year-old is an animal lover. What do you guys do with the pets?
So pets are, no, that's a really great question. Pets are typically recovered before we even get there. The coroner will call animal control to come recover the pets. Although, this is with cats primarily. Cats are really great at hiding, right? And they're tough to catch.
Especially if they got those claws.
So if animal control cannot get a hold of that pet during their first visit, and it may be that they don't even know that the animal's there, right? There's a report that there may be an animal, but we couldn't find it. That's often what the reports will indicate. Then our team will make that a priority. We will send a team out ASAP. We will lay a trap with food. And again, these are humane traps, right? We'll put that trap in the home with some food and water. And we will check it every day to make sure that, we don't have obviously a cat that's living in a trap for days. Plus, as soon as we get that cat, we want to go ahead and turn it over to animal control as well.
And how do you secure the homes? Do you set up CT TVs in there? How do you make sure that the home is secured? Do you board up the windows? What do you do?
That depends on the home, and unfortunately, right now I don't have the cameras in place yet. That's something that I'm actually looking into.
Okay. So that's going to be your next thing you do to continue though.
Right. There are, those those cellular data, camera systems, right, that we're looking into. Okay. Because obviously, we don't want to have to connect to a landline if there's not likely to be one.
Right.
Right. So we're looking at doing that. But we do secure all the doors, and depending on what we see as the needs of the home, we may board the windows. But again, that's really a case-by-case valuation, right? If we were to board up a home where it's not likely to get broken into, then that might just be an eyesore, and the HOA is going to get all over us about it. Right.
Does that stop, by the way? Does the HOA stop? Or do you guys pick up the payments on that?
So that really depends on where we're at in the process, right? Sometimes, just depending on whether or not there are assets to pay from, right, we may have to let those dues accrue and notify the HOA that we're working on the situation
and add it to the price of the house.
Right, exactly right.
Okay. So when you become elected again, what other improvements do you want to do with the office?
So again, I really want to see if we can codify a lot of the safeguards I've got in place now, right? Like I said, just to hold the office accountable. I'd like to see about a reporting requirement to report, like you said, the values of assets that we're collecting, right? To make sure that the city or everyone in the county knows this is the job we're doing, right? And these are the assets that we can report we are protecting for folks here in Clark County. And really, the other changes have to do with just making sure that we put those standard operating procedures in place, beyond also seeking changes in the law. I had the opportunity to propose certain changes to Nevada law in AB 318.
And what does that do?
So the changes that I requested, some of them were just housekeeping measures to allow us to do our jobs better.
Do you lobby the legislators, or do you have a lobbying crew that lobbies, or do you lobby it yourself?
So the county does have a lobbying representative or a lobbyist, but I was able to propose the changes that I would like to see to the trust and estates section of the Clark County Bar, because they had other changes that they wanted as well. And they were kind enough to roll my changes into their bill.
Gotcha.
Right, so I'm grateful to them for that. And
Did
also,
it pass?
Or
is it
double check on
this
because
session?
we already went, right, it's this session, so I don't know that it's been approved just yet. I know it.
Isn't this session over?
We're pretty darn close, but you know when they get to the end, that's when they start approving the bills. I'd say probably a good chunk of them get approved right at the last minute. So we're pretty sure that this bill is going to pass. Knock on wood.
And what's your budget?
So we're at about, say, a little over $1 million a year. So it's a small budget, again, but we're a small office, right? And I do take that all very seriously, making sure that we spend every dollar wisely.
Where are you located?
So we're about the heart of the city. We're just a few blocks west of the Clark County Government Center at
So you're off
515 Shadow
Shadow?
Lane. Yep,
Okay.
You got it.
You need renovation or anything like that? Because President Biden, he wants to do a kind of what's that? To do the bridges and
the infrastructure.
Infrastructure, yes.
So I know that
Do you have an infrastructure budget?
any grants that the administration may be offering for that type of work those grants would be submitted on our behalf by the county.
So you do have a grant writer for your office.
The county would write that, right? And they would take into consideration all of our needs as departments of the county when they're requesting these funds.
Well, Mr. Public Administrator Tellis, I really wanted people to understand this office, because he's not in the news, right? and understand your position in the office. So when they go to the voting booth, and they'll know that, hey, I understand this office a lot more because I watch the Veterans in Politics video and that talk show, and I understand the person running for that office a lot better than I did before the show. So I just wanted to make sure that that everybody has a clear understanding. That's why I went through so many different scenarios and subjects. And thank you so much for being so courteous and answering all those questions. You seem very knowledgeable, doesn't he? Seem very knowledgeable. You have anything else for tell us?
When you're going over the increases in your, I don't want to sound cheesy with statistics, but with your numbers and closed cases and all that stuff, I'm impressed that in 2020, the year that everything shut down, you were able to lead a small team, and to make such improvements on the overall output of your job. I just want to commend you for that. I think that's a really good thing that you've done.
I really appreciate that.
So, PA Tellis, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Could you look into the camera and tell folks why they should go back to the booth and once again put you back in office, and which point of contact was?
Yeah, so I would absolutely be grateful for your vote. I am running for re-election. While we've made some serious strides in the way that the office operates, there's still yet much more work to do, and I look forward to doing that work. So I would be grateful again for your vote. You can contact our office at 702-455-4332 if you have any questions. As of right this moment, regarding my own campaign, I do not have a website up just yet. We're a little early, but That's around the corner. You will be able to visit that at www.rob4nv.com here in just a few months. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Folks, that's Robert Tellis. He's the public administrator for Clark County, and he's been doing a hell of a job. So we have no problems with him. You don't hear about him in the news. That should tell you something. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.